functional program is done, so you're really early phase, you need to incorporate design ideals and design principles from the start. So if the functional program is simply a replication of what you have, which is its intention, you're not going to get a very innovative design result as a consequence. So if you start properly with the functional program, and if the consultations incorporate a design component to them, then you have more of a chance as you move forward towards the RFP to incorporate language and discourse that will actually represent the design ambitions of the institution. That in itself doesn't necessarily guarantee that the RFP will actually contain all that language. But what it does at a minimum suggest is that the adequacy of what you have may not actually match what your ambitions might be. So the second part of it is to actually engage with the competition in a different way. The point system that's used to evaluate each of the competitors needs to adjust. And it needs to adjust in a genuine sense to incorporate a design component. So we initially had hoped we would have about 30 to 40 points on a 100-point scale, and we ended up probably in the 10 to 15 point. And I don't think it was intentional. I think it's just an outcome of the way the process pushes quickly towards some sort of resolution. But during the competition phase, I was very emphatic about the design component to each of the teams. And to some extent that succeeded, because the team that was finally chosen was very heavily sensitized to, to the needs that we had specifically as an institution, and the design principles that we enunciated were enunciated many, many times over and over again to make sure they understood. The next complication, which is also you can overcome, is in the design build phase, when the construction process itself tends to look at various issues, code issues and other details that somehow contradict the design intention, and that has been a challenge. And I think that if in fact your PA, your project agreement, had incorporated enough of those design components to begin with, it would have been more difficult. Language is the key here, as it turns out. And project agreements are written sometimes in haste because you're rushing through RFP competition and so on. They need to be written with a more sensitive eye to the challenges that will occur during the process of construction. So we've had a number of, not changes that we actually envisioned. We were quite satisfied with the original project design, but as the builder has gone into issues of code and various engineering challenges, which you only discover when you get into the process, they've tried to pull back on areas that were very fundamental, which we've actually had to fight hard to preserve. So I think that the overall picture of a P3 from a funding and infrastructure development point of view is actually excellent, but things have to change in the chain of both the chain of process and chain of command, and then that actually has implications for the governance as well. I'm really not against P3s at all. In fact, I think that they are a good model for infrastructure funding. This was a decision on the government. It was a condition of our funding from government. We had to raise about 20% of the total cost. So it was less a choice than something that we had to adhere to in order to get the base funding going. That said, honestly, I think it's on time, relatively. It's a couple of weeks late. And the project is it's stupendous in its own way. So whatever the negatives are, they're offset by the inherent rigor with which the P3 process imposes itself on everyone. Part of it is that the Granville Island campus, both buildings on it, were built to the specs of about 850 students, and we're about 1,900 at this point full-time, and about 2,000 part-time. So it was never built for the spec that it's being used for, and it's improvised space. There's one purpose-built building that is actually quite lovely, and we're sad to see that one go. But the main building, which is the north building, is complete improvisation. People have offices under stairs, and it leaks. It's got millions of dollars in deferred maintenance. So it wasn't a decision as to whether or not we would leave. It was just the mechanics of how to get out of there. And just actually, that said, the legacy of Granville Island is an important part of our history, and we're very, very, we're devoted to at least leaving some of that legacy on the island itself. The one thing that's deeply misunderstood about infrastructure, generally roads, bridges and so forth, they wear out and actually they change, and politicians will make decisions based on a lot of variables. Educational institutions just go on forever, and they are kind of the DNA of a community. And when you actually get involved in building those institutions, you have to be very careful about the implication of that very long-term vision. We see the Emily Carr campus on Great Northern Way very much as a city building process. So we're looking at the area, the flats. We're saying, so what can we do here? Can we get a precinct going here that is actually culturally oriented, because Vancouver needs that? And in fact, what we've discovered, we've been mapping the area, we've discovered that there are 30 to 40 really, really good galleries and companies, 30 or 40 good companies. And actually, we're probably underestimating because we haven't gotten to every street. So that means that more than just the building, it becomes a permeable relationship with the community that we're surrounded by. And that's a long-term investment. It's many, many decades of investment in the future of the economy of the city. The provincial government has recognized over the last 5 to 7 years how significant the technology and design industries are for the future of the economy. And as we've grown that side of the economy, I think everyone has finally realized that's actually where the growth is going to be over the next decade. So in understanding that, the government actually has really come to the party, so to speak, to make sure that the students are in an institution they can graduate from with the knowledge and technologies that they've learned, that they can actually be contributors through the social and economic scene in Vancouver and in BC.